Thank you for joining us for tonight's event. This is hosted by Emmanuel United Church of Christ and the NAACP, Chapter 5087. My name is Reverend George Miller, and I've had the honor to serve Emmanuel United Church of Christ for the past 13 years. And every time we get together for an event or a worship service, there is something we always say, which is, welcome to Emmanuel, where we have a passion for God and compassion for all. We're so thankful that you are here today for a topic that is really so important. I want to keep my comments as short as possible because I'd rather have all the information come from Deputy Young. But to let you know about how tonight's gathering came to be. About 2 years ago, myself as board member at large for the NAACP and our president Angel Wiggins and other members of the NAACP met with Representative Tuck. And one of the things we discovered is that she was very concerned about the topic of sex trafficking of our teenagers. And we felt that that was a topic that we as the NAACP would like to address as well. So we spent about a good year and a half meeting with organizations in Highlands County and Polk County to find out information about what is the reality of sex trafficking of teenagers in Highlands and Polk. What are the warning signs? What are the things that have taken place? We were shocked to realize how much it is happening. We were also shocked to discover that there are teenagers who are being trafficked who don't even know they're being trafficked. And we learned that the image we had of what sex trafficking looked like from the movies didn't really match the reality of what our local teenagers are facing. So we felt the best thing we could do was, after gathering this information, have 2 gatherings this year. Tonight's gathering is geared towards the education and learning how to prevent teen sex trafficking, knowing that we're going into the summer months. And that's a time in which our youth are very vulnerable. But then we're having another one on October 23rd, knowing that just as our children are vulnerable during the summer, they can also be very vulnerable going to school, especially if they're children who are active in extracurricular activities or do a lot of competitions or things that are out and about. Looking ahead, June 5th, we are having a presentation with the NAACP, STD education and prevention for families and youth. And again, we're doing a follow-up in October 23rd. We thank everyone for being here. When we do these events, we send out invitations to the entire county. We don't care what political party you belong to. We don't care what your faith is. We are just so thankful to have the county present. And at a moment, I would just like to ask any of our elected officials who are here, can you please rise for a moment? Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for taking time out and showing your concern and love for the community by being here. Let us enter into a time of prayer. And the last thing I do want to share is we are recording this evening because we want it to be a resource that anyone can access at any time. So there may be a question and answer period. If you do have a question, please know you are being recorded. We're not going to ask you to state your name or address, but we don't want you to be surprised if you end up showing up online a week from now and you're like, wait a minute, they never told us. But let us go ahead and pray. Gracious and Holy One, we thank you for gathering us into this sacred sanctuary. And we give thanks that one of the ways we can show the love of Jesus Christ is to prepare our parents and grandparents to educate our youth and to address realities that we often don't want to deal with. Lord, you know that we love Highlands County, and you know that we love our youth, and you know that we will do anything we can to protect them. Watch over us during this time. Give us the ears to hear and the mind to remember. It is in your Son's name we pray and we say, Amen. And at this time, I'm honored to introduce Deputy Sheriff Young. She has actually spoken here twice at our church before dealing with active shooter. If anyone is a member of a church that wants to address the topic of how to respond during an active shooter, Deputy Young is the person to talk to. She does an amazing presentation. Thank you for blessing us today.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to do a brief introduction of myself. It's going to be brief because it can be very lengthy. So I'll start with saying I have been with the Highlands County Sheriff's Office for 15 years. I am a member of the Florida hostage negotiation team. I am on the hostage negotiation team for the Sheriff's Department. I am a member of NOVA, which is a national organization for victims assistance. Anywhere in the state of Florida or across the United States, if they have crisis, they call upon their members to come and offer aid to those that need it. I'm a member of our CISM team, which is Critical Incident Stress Management. Anytime there's an in-line duty death, or anytime there's a critical incident at another department, they can call on our team. Someone from our team will go and have a sit down with them and try to help them through their ordeal. This topic is very relevant. People want to know just enough about it to say, I know, I've heard, but they don't want to receive and take it home to the reality that is right here. So I'm going to go through this PowerPoint. Questions I'll take at the end. I'm going to just, as neatly and professionally as possible, give you as much information as I can give you that's going to make you more prepared in noticing it, recognizing it, what to do if you see it, and maybe even you could take enough to go back and share with people that you know that couldn't be here tonight. So we're going to start. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain labor or commercial sex. Victims can be any age, race, gender, sex, or nationality. They can come from any socioeconomic background. They can be rich, they can be college kids, they can be homeschooled. Human trafficking happens everywhere. Cities, suburbs, rural areas. Modern day slavery. Time magazine, this is old, but this is the only one they've had on Time magazine, was their cover. That's despite more than a dozen international conventions banning slavery in the past 150 years, there are more slaves today than at any point in human history. Where is Florida ranked? Does anybody have any idea where Florida ranked is? You say number 2? Florida is ranked 3rd in the country for human trafficking. Any idea why? All your ports were surrounded by water, boating in and out, shipping containers in and out, main highways from one tip of it to the other. Human trafficking, the business and the money. So we're going to break down where this falls in the crime in the country. The number 1 crime is drug trafficking, of course, which is approximately $420 billion a year. Number 2 is counterfeiting. Fake Rolexes, purses, name brands, about $250 billion a year. Number 3 in the world. Human trafficking earns global profits of roughly $180 $50 billion a year from traffickers, $99 billion from sexual exploitation. How many people are trafficked globally? Approximately 25 million people a year globally. Now this was last year, so it's only increased. They just haven't gave out the new statistics for me to update yet. 25% of those are children. Florida law, Florida State Statute 787.06 defines human trafficking as the transporting, soliciting, recruiting, harboring, providing, enticing, maintaining, or obtaining another person for the purpose of the exploitation of that person. That's your statute definition. This goes into the different definitions. Commercial sexual activity includes sexually explicit performances and the production of pornography. Sexually explicit performance means an act or show, whether public or private, that is live, photographed, recorded, videotaped, and intended to arouse or satisfy the sexual desires or appeal to the prurient interest. Labor means work of economic or financial value. Services means any act committed at the best of, under the supervision of, or for the benefit of another. The term includes, but is not limited to, forced marriage, servitude, or the removal of organs. They traffic people only to remove their organs. There's big money in that. Some of the sentencing guidelines in Florida: life felony by a term of imprisonment for life, first degree felony by a term of imprisonment for 30 years, second degree 15, and third degree 5. So it's depending on the level, types of human trafficking. Sex trafficking. Kind of going back to what I said previously, it's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of the commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act. Labor trafficking is basically the opposite. They traffic them for the use of servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. So they traffic them if they owe a lot of money and they paid them so much money to get here. We're going to keep you and you're going to do what we say: clean our house, mop our floors, until your debt's paid for, which it's never paid for. Human trafficking examples. This was a notable Highlands County case study. April 20th, 1997. At 10 p.m., a 911 call came into dispatch. Location, Lake Placid. Deputies discover a man lay face down in a pool of blood, shot in the back of the head, execution style. Description of the truck leaving the scene came back to a local labor contractor named Ramiro Ramos. Ramos had 700 orange pickers from Mexico and Central America. The crew called him El Diablo. At Ramos's house, the truck was located. A .45 caliber shell casing was located. Ramos denied any involvement. The victim, Aristo Robellero, was a van driver. So he worked for Ramiro as a driver of one of his trucks. Several immigrants in the van witnessed the murder, however, didn't testify. The case went stale and the murder is still unsolved. This is Ramos Ramiro. FBI opened an investigation into the RNA harvesting company, which had over 700 Mexican and Guatemalan workers. Ultimately, Ramiro Ramos and his two brothers were federally indicted and sentenced to conspiracy to detain workers for involuntary servitude. El Diablo was sentenced to 12 years and 3 months, imprisonment, and a $10,000 fine. As of last year, he resides in the New York, Manhattan area. He has served his time. He is out. We don't know where. That's the last place we had heard he was residing. Has he moved on? We don't know that. Labor trafficking red flags. Top venues, industries for labor trafficking. Domestic work, agricultural, traveling sales crews, restaurants, food service, illicit activities. Abused at work or threatened with harm by an employer or supervisor, that's a flag. Not allowed to take adequate breaks for food, get a drink of water, that's a flag. Not provided with adequate personal protective equipment for hazardous work. Was recruited for different work than he or she is currently doing. Required to live in housing provided by the employer. And has a debt to employer or recruiter that he or she cannot pay off. Sex trafficking recruitment locations. For minor girls, mostly. Schools, libraries, shelters, even the shelters, these girls that go to shelters for help. Believe it or not, there's people in them shelters that know people that abuse these girls. Not all shelters, but it happens, and it's not saying here, but across the country. Parties, malls, abandoned buildings, that's a big one. I don't know why kids want to go to abandoned buildings, but they do. Bus stops, bus rides. You can also add now Uber to that list. Juvenile detention centers and parks. What to look for? You're going to look for poor hygiene. Believe it or not, they are expected to go from one John to one John to one John. They don't get shower breaks in between. They don't get any kind of anything in between. The more they see, the more money they make, the happier their pimp is. Reports an unusually high number of sexual partners. They go into a clinic. How many sexual partners have you had? 312. Well, you're 16 years old. Sexually transmitted diseases. Teenagers at that age, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, they shouldn't have sexually transmitted diseases. So you need to question as to how and why. Has excessive amounts of cash, condoms, multiple hotel key cards, unexplained clothing for the weather or venue. It's wintertime and you got a black leather miniskirt and a bralette, something's up. Reproductive health problems. Uses language common in the commercial sex industry. The life, my agent, trick, John, quotas. Has tattoos or other forms of branding. And they're reluctant to discuss those tattoos or branding. They have bruises, they have bite marks, and they have other odd injuries. Cigarette burns being one. Branding. These are common, and that don't mean because somebody has a tattoo inside their lip, that's what that is. If they fall into the category some of the other red flags, that could be questionable. So they usually will tattoo their John's name inside their lip. They will put a crown in the center of their chest and call him king, whatever his name is, or what he goes by. When they was trafficked or pimped out, what the start date was with a bag of money. That's a symbol for their John. And that's behind the ear, and that's pretty big. So it's noticeable, and that's the whole intention. The story, what is this? I'm going to read it to you because you really can't see it, and it's probably going to be something that you guys have no idea. It's going to be hard to understand. But it says, death of rebirth, dedication, determination, mind, body, and soul, love, honor, and obey, to the root of the beginning, cowboy, produce many seeds of one root, following, understanding, and accepting the fruitful teaching, till death, I live for he, thou he lives in me, anywhere I go, he be forever lives. So that is a scroll, they call that a John verse. That's what they're led to believe. So they put that loud and proud right on the center of their backs. They've had them on their thighs, wherever it's going to be seen. This is Savannah's story. We're going to listen to this. It's a few minutes long, but she is actually a sex trafficked survivor. Her story is pretty sad, but she was willing to do it. So we're going to go with it, and we're going to listen to what she says. Go.
Well, my name's Savannah Parkview, and I am a survivor leader. And I share my experiences from when I was trafficked to help bring awareness and help other victims. I became a victim because my mom was a drug addict, and she was prostituting herself, and she took me with her sometimes. And there was a time when I was 11 that her drug dealer offered her $10 for me instead of for her. I didn't know what a normal child's life was. Like, I didn't have any friends. I didn't talk to people at school because I was always told not to. Like, I would go to school most of the time. But when I came home from school, then a lot of times they were at the bus stop waiting for me to pick me up. He would take me to his house or his friends' houses, and then also to a hotel in the city that people that were in town stayed at. I didn't have a choice as to what I did. I didn't know what was going to happen, how long I was going to be with them, or when I was going to get to go home, or if I was going to get to go home. I was just there. It was like I just existed. One of the things that I think about often is, because I still went to school while this was happening, I would ask my teachers for detention so that I wouldn't have to go home right after school. And I believe I was in the 8th grade when I was doing this. I would ask them for detention, and they would let me stay, but they never asked why I didn't want to go home. So they knew there was a reason I didn't want to go home, but they never asked why. There was always people, like several people coming to the hotel room. And then they always took me to the same hotel. So I always went with the same people a couple times a week. It was obvious that something was happening, and they chose to do nothing. They never asked if I was the one who did it or not. They never asked about any type of abuse. They just listened to why I was there, which is what the staff members told them. And that was it. Like, they never asked me any questions. That made me feel like there was no hope. Because people would see me and see that things are wrong, but they would never ask any questions or second guess anything. There was a time I watched 2 people be murdered who tried to help me. And so they told me that if I ever told anybody, that they would bury me next to them. And so it was more like they scared me to keep me doing what they wanted me to do. It doesn't take a lot to be somebody who it doesn't take a lot to take a minute and think about the people you come in contact with and just ask them if they're okay. You might be the only person who asks them if they're okay. And I mean, that could make all the difference to a victim who's being trafficked, because you might be the person that they tell that they're not okay.
Years old. Her mother sold her for $10 at 10 years old. It took her till she was 26 to realize she was even a victim. To her, that was normal, because that's all she'd known. She had asked her teachers for detention in 8th grade every day. First question would be, sweetheart, why do you want detention? You're not in trouble. But we didn't ask that. We give her detention and then send her on the way to the hotel room. So shame on them. So education. If there's something out of an ordinary about a child, no 8th grader is going to say, can I please stay for detention? You're lucky to get them to go to school. So education. Ask questions. She is a speaker for familia trafficking, which means individuals that have been trafficked by a family member. That's what that means. That's a whole nother level. I mean, yes, that's something we could talk about, but I'm going to stick with this. That is unimaginable. There's another case. Some of these, they start them at 6 or 7 years old. So, bless her for putting her story out there. Orlando operation, November 18th, 2019. This was Orlando, this was 2019. More than 100 people were arrested. Let me get my microphone. More than 100 people were arrested with multiple operations that involved undercovers, solicitation of sex with minors ages 13 to 14 years old, forced prostitution with women. Who are the traffickers? These individuals are not the traffickers. These are examples of who your trafficker could be. They could be any of these people. Looking at them, that wouldn't be your first thought, I'm sure. So just get a good look. It could be anybody. Old, young, it doesn't matter. T visas. Part of the Victims of Trafficking Violence Protection Act, victims of severe forms of human trafficking are eligible for T visas. That allows the victims to remain in the United States to assist in the investigation or prosecution of human traffickers. A victim can apply for permanent residence after 3 years, and additional criteria through U.S. Customs and Immigration. These are resources. So, Sheriff's Office is up there, the Human Trafficking Hotline is up there. ICE is up there. Any anonymous tips. Of course, you got the phone number and you got heartlandcrimestoppers.com. We have an app, smartphone app, the HCSO does, and you can leave a tip on there as well under submit a tip. That's the end of the presentation because I did the 30-minute one. So now I'm going to say, any questions? Yes, sir.
How much has lack of border policy affected traffic? Years ago, we were going to build a wall. It's been a large number of people coming across the border. The officers are overwhelmed. How much did that contribute to human trafficking?
I don't know how much that has contributed, but what I can tell you is that the trafficking is going on right here. It's not being brought in. They're trafficking people that live here already. The people that are coming over that they're bringing over for grove work and things like that, that's labor trafficking. These sexually trafficked people, the individuals that are sexually trafficked, wherever they send them to, if it's a border problem, I can't say, but I know that the ones here are runaways, abused children that is just looking for a friend, that finds a friend, that knows a friend, and then that's just how that goes. As far as bringing them across the border, I can't say that's a big problem with what this is pertaining to. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but with the information I just presented, that's not even a question here. I'm sure it doesn't help. I'm sure it doesn't help that what makes it worse is that they're undocumented. So if they are trafficked, it's harder to find them, help them. They give them a fake name. They don't allow them to carry ID. They don't have birth certificates. I can tell you, if you see an individual in a store, grocery store, which is unlikely because normally they don't like to take them too much in public for questions. They don't want questions. But the pimp, the John, the trafficker, they're going to do most of the speaking. Even if I was to address you, she looks to him, he answers for her. Things like that are cues. If they go, they have no driver's license, they have no form of ID. I've seen it one time. I actually, had a guy, it wasn't a sex trafficking case, it was just a really bad domestic case, to where he would not let her answer anything she was asked, till we separated them completely. If you have a gut feeling, the whole sheriff's department sees something, say something, I put magnets on the table. We would rather be called because you think you see a trafficker with 4 girls and us investigate it and respond versus you not saying nothing at all. So the see something, say something is very important. The key, and like this said, the markings. They're going to be the tattoos, the bruising, especially if they're minors and they're out in public. The clothing is not going to be clean and professional. It's going to be rough, sometimes torn, tattered, dirty. Their hair, they generally don't brush their hair. You're just going to know. They look almost homeless.
Do you have a suggestion of an open-ended type of question? Because just asking the question, are you okay? Of course they're going to say, yes, I'm okay. But is there some other kind of question that would be appropriate to ask, even with the person there, that might help give you an indication if they're being trafficked?
If they're there with that person,
Yeah.
do not approach that. Because that's only going to make it worse for them. Now, if you just slide to the side and they're doing their thing, a few minutes, fine. If you call, tell them I am actively watching this go on right now. I think maybe could possibly be a sex trafficking event, they would send a deputy right then. They would get somebody there. But don't approach that. I would not recommend that. Not for a normal civilian, absolutely not. It's hard, especially if you see them get in the car and drive away. Take a picture of the tag, description of the car. Remember as much as you can remember without being confrontational. Yes, ma'am.
What about the hand signal that they show on TV? Is that?
Yeah, they're doing that, and if they do that, you report that. You don't try to take matters into your own hand if you see that. So if they do that, they're giving you a cue. Call the sheriff's department. Tell them, I have 1, 2, 3 females doing the sign for sex trafficking. Help me. We'll come.
Is that the sign?
Well, it's help. They need help. Yeah. So absolutely, report it right then if you see that. And you tell them they're actively signing that. And that can pick up the pace. Yes?
Do you encounter any homeless people as being trafficking in that arena?
I have not. And the reason why I think that, I could be off base, but I think to be sex trafficked, and this is, I'm just going to put it out there. You have to look the look. You have to have something that this trafficker thinks he's going to get paid for. So most of your homeless community, they have their own little homeless community. They don't tend to be your teenagers and your younger female, male, because it's female and male. I mean, they traffic both. But they tend to be people that has, come on some hardship, have lost things, lost their homes. So they're more of an adult that I've seen. I'm not saying there's not children, but usually if there's children, they're usually with their parents. I haven't seen it. Is it out there? It could be. But I don't want to say it is if I haven't seen it myself. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So I know that we have some grandparents who are here today because they wanted to gather information to share with their grandchildren. What are some of the things that our grandparents can share with their grandchildren for the upcoming summer, in which if an adult comes to you and says this could be a warning sign, or this is the kind of thing to look out for? So like, how can we prepare our teens not to be trapped in a situation like this?
When it comes to your own grandkids, their friends, what I will tell you is you can only help them when they're open. If they're hiding things from you, do you really know? So here's what I'm going to tell you. My children despised me from middle school through high school. You know why? They didn't make a phone call. I didn't know who they were calling. I drove them to somebody's house. If their parents wasn't there, they didn't stay. If I didn't know their mother and father's home, grandparents, there wasn't nothing about these people I didn't know. And of course, you get, well, that's embarrassing. Well, nobody else's parents does that. It's because it's what you do, your job. No, ma'am. No, ma'am, it's not. I could be a bagger at the grocery store, but I'm going to know where my kid is. So when it comes to social media, all the social media stuff in your home, when your grandkids come and they want to play games on the computer, or they want to do anything on their phones, or make a common area, whether it's in the family room, kitchen table. You want on electronics, you're going to be on them right here. Right here. Right in the kitchen at the table. There's no passwords. We don't put passwords on our phones. Why you put a password? You're 14. What do you got to have a password for? Well, because it's private. Well, then take the phone. I mean, nowadays, people want to be friends to their children. No. You're not their friend. You're their parent. You're their protector. And one day that'll click. It'll click. My daughter thinks I hung the moon. And my son, he's still borderline, you know, but it wasn't nothing because I could. It was because that's my job. I don't want somebody else taking advantage of my kids or anybody else's. So if you're going to do social media with your kids or your grandkids, if you're going to allow them access to computers and apps and cell phones, do it in a common area. Limit the time they do it. If you're in bed, they don't need to be on the phone. They don't need to be on the computer. There's a button you can push on your computer that shuts off the internet. You can set the time your internet works at your house. I'm not saying seclude your children. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying be mindful. Know where they're at. If you drop them off at sports, that's fine. If you can stay, stay. But if you can't, make sure you're there to pick them up, or somebody else is there to pick them up, and you're not leaving your kid to be the last kid at the ball field. There's just little things. It's just more common sense when parents start being parents and parent their children. It helps. Questions, ask them. Ask
Those
them.
resources you get, but what if you know about a kid who's in an abusive household? It's not your kid.
Right.
But you can see that they might be open to, you see the behaviors and things like that. Then who?
If it's like a domestic situation, is that kind of what it is? Like a child abuse, more?
Well, more neglect. They can be in a household.
That's going to be
doing her thing. She might be a drug addict.
That's going to be a Department of Children and Families. You can anonymously do it. You can anonymously give tips anywhere. You don't have to give your information. But if you have that feeling, call it in. All they're going to do is investigate it. If it's nothing, okay. But if it's something, good for you. Did I answer your question about the kids?
The other part was, what are the things that will be said to them face to face that could be a warning sign?
Okay, I'm a tough love person. So I never hid anything from my kids. I gave them reality. Here's what happens. If you lie to mom and dad and you go places you say you're going but you don't go and go somewhere else, this is what's going to happen. A, B, C, D.
I was meaning more, what are the things that John says to the teens?
Oh, they try to befriend them. So if you have kids that are mad at their parents because they're being strict and they get away, they have a way. The Johns themselves don't approach these kids. They have their other trafficked females or males make friends with these children and these kids and say, hey, guy I work for, he'll take care of you. Food, look at these clothes. Look at this purse. That's a $500 purse. He'll take care of you. Come meet him. Then it starts like that. It's not, he says, hey, come talk to me. Let me explain what we do and how. It's not like that. They start and they instill a friendship. And once their worker makes that friendship, now they got it. See, now that kid's like, well, she's my friend and she's fine. She's got all these nice things. I mean, she eats steak. She's got a $500 purse. I mean, she's fine. So why couldn't I do that? So they kind of put that self-doubt in their head that the parent's not giving them what they need, but the John can give them what they need. He'll understand. He won't be strict. He'll let you go to the party. He'll let you go have fun. He ain't got rules. So they try to build that friendship. Whatever the kid's experiencing at home, he tries to instill the opposite. So if you're strict at home, he's not strict. All he asks that you show up for work. He'll give you the money. You can do whatever you want. Well, to a 15, 16-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid, that's heaven right there. They want to come and go as they please, have all the nice things. don't want to have parents to worry about, that's how they do that.
So you're saying the adult Johns are not going to directly go to our teens, they're going to use other
Correct.
trafficked teens
Correct.
to go to our children?
Correct.
So if I'm a parent and I kind of get a gut feeling in my stomach that something just doesn't feel right about this new friend,
Right.
may want to investigate and look at like pocketbooks, what they're wearing, what they're saying.
Yes.
Find out more about their own home life and everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Are they enrolled in school? Doubtful. If they are, do they show up? Probably not. I mean, there's things, when they go that route, there's things you can do. If you have a gut feeling about a kid that your kid's hanging out with, I just cut it off. But if you want to do the benefit of the doubt, then yes, let me meet their parents. Well, she don't have parents. Really? I mean, so that's how you start with, let me meet their family. Let me talk to their mom and dad. If dad just so happens to be the John, you're going to know right out the gate. I mean, you're going to know. But he's not going to meet you. So, always question, yes. Always question. Yes, sir.
That was the point of how very accurate you need to be when you're parenting a young person, and to not find yourself competing
Right.
with the John or the system that exists. So yeah, there is the line of strictness and how we can individually run our house. But I think if parents start to, out of fear, implement some of these things out of nowhere, that also pushes the youth in a different direction.
Right.
So if you let your foundation always be, even with the friends that you approve of, that you're constantly talking to their parents, or you're meeting them, or you are surrounding them with your tribe of people that you already know and trust, it's not odd when some brand new young person enters the scene, and then you're all of a sudden going, well, let me meet their parents, because kids protect each other.
Yes,
That's
they
the
do.
mindset that they have, is right. It's adults against them.
Yes.
And that system can be properly worked if parents are not trying to befriend, but understand the value of friendship.
Right.
Because that's
Right. And
that's
I
important.
100% agree. And what I call it is my own little thing. I used to tell my kids all the time, if they're outside of your security circle, then they need vetted. I'm just going to, and I hate to say it's true. I want to know mom and dad, brother, sister, I want to know. I want to know where they live. There's things I just want to know. And if you don't want, and here's why. That's where I follow that up with, here's why.
It goes to network.
Yes.
Who's in your network? Who's in your inner circle? Who's in your outer circle? Who's in your school circle?
Yes. Yes.
Who is your immediate network?
Yes. And, I was pretty, but when I implemented something, I always gave a, here's why. I didn't just say, it's this way or no way, because I knew where that was going. I knew where that was going. So I always gave a worst case scenario. This could possibly happen, and I want you to understand that. And then we just went on, because you don't know what this person's going to do. You don't know where they're going to take you. You don't know the kind of friends he has. You don't know. That's my job to know before I let you go do that. So it's all that securityness, that circle. You have to, don't just tell a kid, a child, a teenager, you're not doing it. Don't do that, because you know what they heard? I'm on my way. That's what they heard. So don't do that. Just, my kids respond better if I set rules and boundaries, if I tell them why I did that. And do they like it? No. But they understand it. And that's all I'm looking for. I want them to understand that I'm not the evil mother. And they do. They get it. They don't like it, but they get it. Anything else?
Well, I just want to say that's where grandparents come in, because a lot of times kids will tell grandparents things that they would never tell their parents. And if you have a good relationship, you can form that good listening relationship that those, my grandmother, because she didn't punish, she wasn't a punisher, she wasn't a
Right.
representative. But she was a person who understood no matter what I did, it was okay. I would still be okay in her eyesight. So I felt safe.
Yes.
So grandparents can maybe get information about what kids are doing that they might not even share with them.
And that's true. And where you used yours as a safety place, bless my mother who passed away. However, my daughter and my son, what scared them the most is when I said, I'm going to tell you, Grandma. Because they didn't want that disappointment. They didn't want to see that on her face. Mom?
That's right.
Grandma? No.
That's right.
So, and she never disciplined them. But something about that grandma face, and they kids would just cry. I mean, but they didn't want to see the disappointment.
Yeah.
To where your mom and dad, and you're constantly harping on your kids, and they get over it. I mean, kids, they don't even hear me half the time. Like, do you hear me? Yeah. But are you listening? So yeah, the grandma thing, grandpa thing, that's a good point.
We have to be aware of all the things
Yes.
that you just told
Yeah,
us, right?
you do.
Yeah.
And even if, when I'm gone, if there's questions you have, Reverend Miller has my work cell number, and all you gotta do is call me, and I'll answer it. If I don't have the answer, I'll get it for you. Any kind of phone numbers you need, resources, I'll get it. Yes, sir.
How much validity should we be placing on the things that have circulated through Facebook and through TikTok about like the zip ties, the money on the ground, the different things that you see posted on your windshields, the stuff that you can be picked up from you grabbing your handles? Like, all of these are valid tactics in other places, or fear tactics that have been circulating throughout social media, and where should we stand as far as our community, as far as how much of that to believe? There's just so much stuff that you have to kind of weed through. So
Here's what I'm gonna tell you. I don't believe anything on social media. I don't, personally.
right.
Unless I see it, or it happens to me, I can't justify saying, yes, that's true. But here's what I will tell you. If there's something that you think is valid, call the sheriff's department, see if they've had other complaints, see if a deputy has responded in reference to your question, whether it's needles in the gas handle pump, or call them. We have a call log. We'll know if there's other calls coming in, where they're coming from, and if we're responding to them, or if it's just a prank. So to sit and say things don't happen, I can't. But I can tell you, if you have something that you're really concerned about, if there's pornographic flyers being put on the vehicles, call it in. We can go and pull security footage, find cars they get in of, out of, see license plates. There's ways to get to it if it's a valid problem. I don't want to say just because it's on social media, oh yeah, that's true. We can answer 90% of your questions when you call in. We'll know, hey, we haven't had anybody else say a word. Or yes, we're aware it's a scam. You know, they're just trying to put the fear of God in people and trying to scare them. And a lot of times that'll happen in certain areas where they want to do a bunch of burglaries. So they'll say, hey, in this area, there's a bunch of men running around naked and knocking on doors and doing things. And so people won't go to that area. So if you're not home and they're working burglaries, you know, so there's always a method to the madness that they put out there. So I don't want to tell you that it's not true, but I can tell you that we can answer it for you if you call. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I get the push things from sheriff's department, and often there's things that are scams that are working in the area right on their website.
You have our app, don't you?
Absolutely.
Good for you. For those of you that don't, go to your Play Store, download the HCSO app, and it gives you all the scam alerts and things.
It also gives you the traffic.
How bad is the trafficking problem in our county? Do we have a lot, have you guys arrested a lot of traffickers, or how bad is it here?
I have not. In the past, before me, I don't know. But I can tell you that that's public record. So if you want to know, if you go to the sheriff's department's main lobby and tell them, you know, between this time and this time, has there been any calls for sex trafficking? And it's either going to say 0, that means we've responded and worked them, or it's going to say 1, but if it's pending, they're not going to give you information. But anything that's closed, yeah, I mean, we have, of course, we were cyber hacked, so I don't know how good all that information is going to be, but there's a way that you can, I haven't heard, now mind you, I'm not in investigations, but generally a case like that travels through the agency, and I'm sure I would have heard it. So right now, we have no active ones that I am aware of. But if they're working them, that's that secret squirrel stuff, and I wouldn't know. I wish I could be more, you know. Yeah, I haven't heard about any. That doesn't mean they're not. I just haven't heard that there's any going on right now. Yes, sir.
So I have one more question, and I appreciate everyone's patience with me. So since we started this program, you know, we've become more aware that we cannot view the Super Bowl the same way we used to, as just an innocent occurrence, which has now made 12 hours of Sebring rather uncomfortable for me. I'm hearing you give some information that's maybe different than I was expecting. When an event like 12 hours of Sebring does take place, we do know there is human trafficking that's taking place. Are they going to most likely be bringing in people from the outside, or will they be going after our children here and turning them into traffic victims?
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah,
You said 12 hours of Sebring.
right.
We know there's human trafficking taking place. Do we?
So I've always understood that whenever there's a big sporting event or a big event that takes place, there is an increase in that.
A possibility of an increase in that.
Okay.
I can tell you, as long as I've been there, at the sheriff's department, 15 years, no.
Okay.
That's been reported. There's the difference. Does it happen and not reporting? I'm sure. And what I'll tell you, according to research I've read, they generally have a bunch of people they bring with them. They're not there to recruit new. If it happens, it happens. But they're there to bring their business girls that they already know can deliver. If that's what's happening. If it's happening, now that NASCAR's took that over, that is way different than it was 10 years ago. I mean, it is way different. You can't even have golf carts. You can't stand up in a truck. I mean, it's on lockdown. But it's still a good time. So I can't say it doesn't. I can say it's not been reported, and I can say under the circumstance and according to that stuff's put in play, in motion, months before these events take off. And it's generally people they already have. I don't want to say on staff, but yeah, on staff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I have one question.
Uh-huh.
Is human trafficking the same as forcible sex offenses, or does it have its own, or like on Florida charts or something, does it have its own?
Yeah, if I go back to, let me get my clicker. It's broke down into multiple groups. you have a sex trafficking and a labor trafficking. Now, the sex trafficking induced by force means I'm making you come with me, and I don't care what you say, according to the Florida statute.
So is that forcible sex offenses, or is it on Florida charts as human trafficking?
No,
Okay.
no. On a normal, if somebody just snatched you out of your car and forcibly took you and raped you,
That's a
I mean, they call it different because it's punishable. It's punishable different than what these
because
are.
it even has it different. It has forcible sex and then it has rape.
Yeah, it's all, look, these statutes, and they change. It's just, there's different punishments, and
Okay.
it's a system. It's a point system, a scale system. And this one is specific to sex trafficking.
But when the young ladies are put out there, they're basically being forced into that, even though they don't look at it.
They are, but they're being forced into it,
Right,
and they're receiving payment for it.
right,
It's labor.
right.
So it's a traffic solicitation for the purpose of commercial sex. It's not just a snatch you, drag you in the woods, rape you, and leave. Anything else? All right, Reverend Miller.
All right.
Thank you so much. You know, one of the reasons why I love serving Emmanuel is that we are a church that believes in asking hard questions, and we're also a church that's okay being corrected if we misspeak. And I hope that you witnessed with the interaction we just had that even though I've been busy working and talking to people for the past year and a half, I myself may be misinformed, and the only way to gather the information is to have the courage to ask those difficult questions. We want to thank everyone who is here. We want to remind you that this will be available online so you can share it with family members, you can watch it again. I would assume that if people had some more questions, like you said, they can contact me and I can direct them towards you. Or the Sheriff's Department. You know, Sheriff Blackman does an amazing job of reaching out to the community. Yes?
Yes, a question of finding it online. Will it be through the church's website?
Go to the church's website and you'll be able to find it that way. You could also go to the church's Facebook page, which will lead you to the website. I'd also like to just say thank you to Heartland Coalition for the Homeless who are outside with information. Also Peace River, which does an amazing job working with people who are survivors of abuse. One of the great things about Peace River is they address the fact that both men and women can be survivors. And if you go into our bathrooms, you will see in both the men's bathroom and the women's bathroom, there is information for both genders if they happen to be survivors or currently being abused and they need assistance. We want to thank the NAACP. We want to thank Madam Vice President Aisha Aliande from Core Wellness, who has been able to bless us, in which mental health and the care for the community is so essential. And before we close for tonight, we want to remind everyone again, June 5th, we are doing a presentation on STD education and prevention for families and youth. We really hope that families feel comfortable coming here with their teenagers, because that can be a difficult conversation to have, but sometimes hearing it together makes it a little bit more, perhaps easier for the parent. We will not turn youth away because we feel that if a youth comes here, there is a reason why. And we are honored that Larry Moore will do the presentation on that day. And then October 23rd, we're doing a follow-up on the prevention of teen sex trafficking, in which our focus will be, okay, the summer's over, now our children are going to school. What are some of the things you may want to be mindful of or look out for? Thank you everyone for being here, for having the courage to address a difficult situation and not being afraid to discuss this. Let us go ahead and close in a word of prayer. Faithful and gracious one, we thank you for the gift of creation. And we give thanks that your Son, Jesus Christ, has called us to love our neighbor, to show compassion. And we give thanks that tonight we have had an opportunity to show compassion not only to our family, but to be mindful of those who are perhaps going through difficult times. It is in your name we pray and we say, Amen. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight.